Hello, this is Jazz Rasul, and here I'm going to give you a guided tour of the features of the Atmascape image, and specifically how you interpret the colours and the features on the actual image itself. Something that can help you see the colours a little bit more clearly is if you take the grid, the actual lines off the actual image. You can do that by just clicking on the toggle grid button, and you'll find that it's a lot clearer to actually look at when you're doing it that way. I personally like to have the grid on so I can accurately see what features line up with, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave the grid on. There we go. Okay. Now, what you'll see is that there are two major lines that you can see here. Vertical line going through the middle and a vertical line that goes through each of the areas of learning, and there are horizontal lines that go through each of the areas of need, and there's two major lines as well. There's a vertical line which divides the area to do with yourself and with other people. It's your personal boundary, if you will. Everything to the left here is to do with your own personal space and what you're doing in it. Everything to the right is to do with the space that you share with other people, your interpersonal space. The horizontal line divides the real world from what's going on inside of you, inside of your psychology, your mind and your heart, and you can see it's centered on the line of emotion. Everything below that line is to do with the real world, things that are tangible, measurable, and can be seen and shared with other people typically. So that includes your welfare, your well-being, your wealth, and that also includes your values, your motivation and your drive. Above the line of emotion are the things to do with what's going on inside of you or inside of other people, namely feelings, obviously your intellect and the thoughts that you have and the vision that you've got for your life and how creative you actually are with it. So everything above the line corresponds to what's going on internally within you. Everything below the line corresponds to what's going on outside of you in the real world. Now, the lines here, I'm just going to keep them on, I'm not going to take them off, so that it's easier to interpret some of the features that I'm going to show you. Now, the obvious features obviously are the areas of colour. The areas that are red are in this image to do with the areas I'm scoring least in, and in this particular profile you can see that when it comes to how I'm experiencing and knowing my own emotions, you can see this area of red here, that corresponds to how I experience and know emotion. How I'm tuning into my feelings, that's an area where I'm scoring least well in. So up here on the top right you can see there's another area that's to do with how well I'm helping other people to experience and know or tune into their creativity, their vision, their view of life and its meaning. That's another area that I'm doing least well in. Last but not least, on the bottom right you can see in the area of energy to do with my values and motivation and drive, I've scored myself quite low there too, and that's to do with how I'm actually helping others harness and manage their values and the motivation and drive, how they're putting things into practice in those areas. That's another area that I feel I'm doing least well in. Now, it might be that it's important for me that I'm doing well in these areas, in which case if I see this, if I see areas that are low scoring, then obviously I've got to make a choice about whether or not I should do something about it and go and learn some skills, develop some capacities to improve my ability in that area. However, it is possible that a low scoring area is a low scoring area because it's not important to you, in which case you shouldn't really pay any attention to it because it's not relevant for you. It has no resonance for what you're trying to do in your life. Equally, if we look at the other end of the spectrum and look at the colours of blue, you can see that I feel I'm doing quite well in how I'm managing my reality, especially in terms of how I'm practicing things, harnessing and managing things to do with my values and motivation and drive, and how I'm also managing and practicing things relating to my welfare, well-being and wealth. a little bit higher up, you can see in the area of intellect and how that relates to my emotion and how that interconnects with my creativity, almost across the board of my own personal space. The way that I think about life, how I tune into my thoughts, how I practice my thoughts, how I come up with new ways of thinking, I'm doing pretty well in that area. And you can see that there's a horizontal kind of white streak here, and wherever you see white areas, they correspond to areas of habit. They correspond to areas of focus. If you see a horizontal line, if you literally follow the line to the edge, you can see what it relates to. In this case, you can see obviously it relates to psychology. It's saying I've got a habit that I seem to follow around my thoughts, around how I think intellectually. And it's surrounded by the area of blue, which is high scoring. So that habit must be generating high results. So it must be a good habit. It must be something that's serving me and empowering me. If you see a white streak in an area of red, then obviously that habit is generating low scores for you, and that means it's probably not an empowering habit. It's actually disempowering. It's undermining you in some kind of way. Often people who have addictions will tend to have white streaks in red areas, indicating that they've got habits which are not healthy for them and not empowering them. Over here on the right, in the area of me helping other people with their reality, especially around their emotional areas in life, you can see I've got some strong habits there. These aren't particularly powerful habits. The scores here are around 7. They're pretty good in terms of the often ways that I spend time with other people, helping them with their emotions and how they tune into them and how they practice working with them on a daily basis. I seem to be doing pretty well in that area, and whatever habits I have in helping people, they clearly are of benefit of some kind, because the turquoise blue colours are obviously quite strong colours to be represented on this particular image. So I've got some good habits there as well in terms of how I'm helping other people. Now you see vertical lines of white. Just as horizontal lines correspond to areas of need or energy, vertical lines correspond to areas of learning to do with your emotional intelligence, the stages of learning to do with your emotional intelligence. This vertical line corresponds to how I'm building and developing myself in my own personal space in the area of reality, and you can see that I've got quite a strong habit in terms of how I go about dealing with reality in new ways, how I go about building and developing new ways of dealing with reality for myself. And you'll also notice the colours again are kind of turquoise, so this is quite a healthy habit that I've got. I seem to be very good at finding new ways of dealing with reality. And you can see there's also a vertical line here to do with how I help other people tune into their values and motivation, their drive, their energy, and also how they help them with their welfare and well-being and their wealth, all the way up to actually helping them emotionally as well. So I seem to have a good habit in terms of helping other people tune in to their physical reality. There's kind of a diagonal line over here on the right hand side, and also perhaps here as well. I've talked about horizontal lines and how they relate to focusing on a particular need, and vertical lines looking at how they focus on a particular way of learning how to do things. So those lines relate to what you're actually learning and how you're actually learning. But diagonal lines mean something else. Whenever you see a diagonal line in an image, it usually relates to the fact that you're having a focus on who you're actually learning with. If you see diagonal lines in the bottom left, that's obviously in your own personal space and how you're surviving. It means you're focusing on managing yourself at this particular time. If you see a diagonal line in the middle area, either in the top left quadrant or the bottom right quadrant, that's an area to do partly with yourself and partly to do with other people. It's an area often associated with your social interactions, how you are in groups. So if you see any diagonal lines in these two areas, it relates to a focus or a habit that you have, that you employ in social situations, how you interact with other people in group situations. In the top right quadrant, if you see diagonal line right at the top right, that corresponds obviously to how you help other people in their intellectual and creativity areas. It's an area to do with leadership. If you see a diagonal line in that area, it corresponds to you having a habit or an area of focus to do with you leading other people, being a leader of some kind. So horizontal lines relate to what you're learning. Vertical lines are a focus, showing that you're looking at how you're learning, and diagonal lines correspond to you being focused socially, either helping yourself, helping others in a group situation and perhaps being helped by them, or completely focused on helping other people in a leadership role, if you see the diagonal line on the top right of the actual image. Now, with this image, you are looking at a static image. You don't know how these focuses or habits actually came to be. You don't know why it is that you ended up scoring low in a particular area or high in another area. What would be really useful is if you could see a sequence, and then maybe you could make a judgment on seeing how your life is evolving and what things are emerging, what things are disappearing, and maybe you could even make a forecast as to what might be coming up next. So what we'll do next is just have a look at what would it be like to get an overview of how your life has been going, what the underlying trends are, and explore perhaps where things could be going, and see if we can make some kind of even forecast of prospectively what might be happening next in your life. So we'll explore that in the next video.